Welcome, everybody. My name's Gary Fortney, and this is The Trend. Hello, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in to the Trend podcast. Good to have you back. We're going to talk a little bit about cults. And so, what are cults? So, cults are a tight group of individuals who have certain callings, certain, what they say, missions, and certain themes of what's important to them within their individual cult. We've had some very interesting cults throughout the years. One of the most interesting ones was the Heaven's Gate cult. Heaven's Gate was a group of individuals in San Diego, California, where there was a comet named Hale-Bopp Comet, and they thought they were all going to catch a ride on the Hale-Bopp Comet, and they all decided to kill themselves inside a house in San Diego. And that was their goal, to do this. So that's one of the more interesting ones. I've studied that case a little bit. We're not going to talk about that case right now, perhaps sometimes in the future. All right. We're going to talk about cults regarding three main cults that came to being both within the media as well as political, as well as the law enforcement aspect. First one is going to be Charles Manson. Charles Manson came into being in the 60s, and his group of followers were involved in numerous murders that happened. We're also going to talk about Jonestown. The Reverend Jim Jones, he led people to form a cult with him, and they committed mass suicide in Ghana, and along with a congressman, Leo Ryan, was murdered at the time. We're going to talk about that cult, and then we're also going to talk about Waco. And the Waco incident, David Koresh, the cult with David Koresh resulted in a lot of people losing their lives in a fire that happened in the city of Waco, Texas. And there was an incident that happened as a result of the Waco incident. That was the bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building, where a lot of young children, people were killed and severely injured. So we're going to talk about Charles Manson today. And talking about Charles Manson by myself just wouldn't be right, because I like to get the thoughts of some other individuals involved. And so actually, we have a new employee with Trend Media. She started as an intern. Now she's going to be an employee. Her name is Georgia Means. Georgia, thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this.
Great. And Georgia was a college student of mine in my college classes, and we recruit a lot of our interns. My intern program is not a cult, all right? The intern program is getting young individuals involved to pursue their professional careers in law enforcement. Right, Georgia?
Yep. And it's not a pyramid scheme either.
Okay, good deal. So we got that. So anyways, Georgia was in a college class, and Georgia joined the intern program to get her college credits for college, as well as pursue a possible career in law enforcement, some different aspects. And then Georgia, after becoming an intern, she expressed a lot of interest in pursuing this, both with Vista Law Enforcement training, working with us, as well as Trend Media. So Georgia is now going to be working with Trend Media, and we're happy to have you along. Georgia is going to be a production assistant for Trend Media, working with producers Sarah and Allie. And so, Georgia, you started researching Charles Manson, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's just get to the point. What do you think of Charles Manson personally, from what you found out?
I think that he is a little dude who somehow, some way figured out how to manipulate all of these very vulnerable women who were, most of them were not in a good place. Most of them were not, they didn't have their own home or they were on their own, just kind of looking for sanctuary. But I mean, I kind of think he is just, I don't know, a little devil man, kind of.
That's a good way to put it, actually. One thing I like about Georgia is she's very candid and very straightforward about her response, which is what we like, all right? Family-friendly show, so we got to keep that in mind. So anyways. Okay, Georgia, so that's your personal opinion about Charles Manson, right?
Yes.
And you did some research into Charles Manson. We're going to talk about some factual aspects about his life. I'm going to have you kick it off. Where should we start with Charles Manson?
Great question. So from the research that I did and just pretty much what every source said is that Manson was in and out of juvenile facilities and just basically in and out of jail his whole entire life. He started with a lot of petty crimes like theft and like that kind of stuff. And then as he grew up, he ended up, one of his more violent charges was that he actually raped a boy at knife point, and he ended up getting caught for that. And then that was just one of the many reasons, though, why he went to jail. He had suspended sentences. He was on probation for a while. But yeah, I mean, like, I think he had like maybe 17 years of his life in total where he was not locked up. But I mean, he was just in and out of the, jails and stuff like that, basically his whole beginning life, and not very good either.
What about his birth and upbringing? You did a lot of research into that. You have some interesting facts about that the public might not know. So let's go into that a little bit.
So he was born, I do not recall what his mother's name was exactly, but I know she was 16 years old whenever she had him. She was in and out of all of these relationships. And then she ended up going to jail for about, I think it was between like 5 or 10 years. And at that point, he was sent to live with his relatives in West Virginia with his aunt and uncle, which is where he ended up getting in some trouble. And that's what started him being in and out of institutions. But yeah, and I mean, there's a story that's out there as well that says that Charles Manson's mother tried to trade him for a pitcher of beer. The waitress gave her the beer because she had said something about wanting to have a child. The mother drank the beer, gave her the baby, left, and actually Charles's uncle had to come and search the whole entire town to find this waitress and get him back and say, "Oops, you're not supposed to be here."
Now think about that. Let me talk a little bit about children. A lot of children, teenagers, even adults come from broken families, all right? And that's heartbreaking, a lot of circumstances. But that does not give people the right or the I guess the fortitude to go out there and commit crimes to become. Now, of course, that impacts lives of people. We all know that, all right? But Charles Manson did have a choice, and he had some choices in his life, right? And one choice he had, he wanted to be a musician. Fill us in a little bit about being a musician, where that was on a pathway that could have turned a little more positive in his life. So
yeah, so something that I recently just read was that whenever Charles was in jail, he ended up being like mentored kind of. He was taught how to play the guitar and taught kind of how to be a musician by somebody that was already in jail. It was an infamous gang leader or something like that. I can't remember what his name was. So anyway, Charles ends up somehow getting affiliated with the Beach Boys. He ends up writing a song for them, and he actually recorded a few, but that ended up not going through the producer that he was talking to, which actually ties into the Tate murders that we'll talk about in a little bit. That producer, I guess, kind of strung him on a little bit and then ended up being like, "Hey, never mind. Don't think this is going to work out." And it did have something to do criminally. It was because something had happened. Charles had done something criminally, and they found out about that. And they're like, "Okay, maybe not. But, you have a good voice, whatever." He did get featured on some of the Beatles songs. I think he wrote a couple of them for him, for the Beach Boys. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But yeah.
interesting. So let's say you're taking a pathway towards music. It's not easy breaking into that type of industry.
Mm-mm.
It's not easy opening a business, which is, I well know. It takes hard work. So again, 2 pathways he took. He could have went one pathway to try and make positive out of his life. Even being in prison, you can still make a positive aspect, or you can go the other way. And he became, I guess, people gravitated towards him. Like I say, he was small. He was a short guy, right?
Oh, barely over 5 foot, very tiny, just didn't have a lot to him. Didn't seem very intimidating either, unless if you got to talking to him.
So let's about other figures that people gravitate towards. One is Luigi Mangione, right? He murdered a CEO of United Healthcare. And we have all these people gravitating towards him.
Is it him or his face?
Him.
Yeah.
They're giving him money.
Yeah. Why?
Because they're gravitating towards him because they like him. They think that he was wronged. They think he should be taken on the healthcare industry. All right. How about the killing in Texas where you had an individual stab and kill another young person in the stands? All right. At a football game, I believe.
Oh, yeah. The children. Right. Yeah.
And so,
crazy.
So what about this? So people are donating to the defense fund of the person charged with this killing, hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s. What about the victim? What about the victim's family? What about the family of the CEO who was killed in New York? What about donating to his family or his kids? All right. So what I'm saying is that people gravitate towards certain individuals that sometimes just don't understand why. In my career, I've worked several murder cases where women actually married the guys in prison.
Oh, I was about to bring that up and be like,
you're about to do that.
oh God, no.
Okay.
But I mean, it's the same exact thing. People are just so interested in it and they're so curious because most people can't imagine themselves committing any kind of violent crime or anything like that. And so whenever they see this, they're so enticed by it and they're just like, they just can't help but want to know more and to be drawn to it.
Well, Mangione has a face that could kill. So we'll talk about his face again. All right. So let's go a little bit deeper into that.
All right.
So people have that ability to attract people. That's how cults are formed. It's not how they look. It's what they do, what their persona is. So Manson attracted a lot of people, right? So why do you think they gravitated towards him? What's your thought process about that?
I think it's kind of one of those fake it till you make it situations. I think that he coined or crowned himself all knowing. I think that he wore the outfit. I mean, he acted the way, and if you act it, then you are it. And I think that's kind of what he did. He kind of just pretended until everybody else around him started to be like, oh yeah, you know what? He is kind of this like messiah. He is kind of, you know what? He is kind of all knowing. And also whenever you're in a group and there's other people too that are, I don't know if you could say worshiping, following, devoted to the same person, it kind of just, you're like, it kind of helps you accept it and be like, yeah, like he just knows everything, you know?
Well, one thing too is it's funny to have one or two people attract somebody, but to have multiple people do that is very interesting. At least, I'm not a psychologist. I have interrogated many murder suspects in my career, and trying to get into the psyche sometimes is interesting. So how about this? Manson has his followers, and then they go live on a ranch.
Yeah, his family.
His family, exactly. Yeah. So what do you know about that, about his family living with him?
On Spawn Ranch?
Yeah.
So I know that the ranch was, I read that the ranch was ran by this old man who was blind. It was just like some, I don't know, very weird thing. They used to use the ranch. It's out in the middle of like the boonies, out in the middle of nowhere. And they used to use it for film sets and stuff like that. Didn't use it anymore. And the Manson quote family cult, whatever you want to call it, they were like, hey, you know, this would be a great place to come settle down, have a couple of, you know, group projects. I say that.
Group projects. Yeah. That's fine. Go say it. Yeah.
I say it. Yeah. So they were like, you know what? This is a great place for us to pop some LSD, have a few orgies, and plan some killings. And also, let's also think that there's a race war. What can I say? Conceptualize a race war.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was a great place to do some drugs and also plan out how they were going to take over the country after the inevitable race war that they thought was going to break out.
And race war, what that means is 1960s was a tough time on minorities. There were issues of discrimination against the Black population, discrimination against other individuals. And there's no question that it was a Black guy to our country and society. Well, Manson took it a step further, right? And so he wanted to tackle, quote, the race war. He wanted to tackle all this on, and that's part of his overall goal to do all that too. All right. So let's say Manson's on Spawn Ranch. They did do a lot of filming there. It was pretty much deserted at the time, and he got the owner to let them live on the ranch. So he had his family or followers there too. And they tried to live in harmony, but then behind the scenes, they're also planning crimes, right?
Well, it slowly started to work into the crimes. I think after time, everybody was just on a lot of acid and they were getting probably a little antsy out there. I heard there was a story involving a drug deal that went sideways. Manson ended up shooting a drug dealer, thought he killed him, got scared, and then allegedly, or this is at least what I read, that is what kind of led into the Tate murders. But I do want to touch up on the race war thing because he was fully convinced that the Beatles, Paul McCartney, had written the song Helter Skelter as a warning and as like a prophecy for Manson, so that Manson knew that the race war was happening. He was saying that all the Black and the white people are going to fight each other. The Black people would win, and then Manson would emerge from his ranch and all of the Black people would bow down to the Manson family members and would, I guess, like worship him.
Yeah, worship him. You know, and you talk about the drug use too. Yeah, LSD, that's a hallucinogen drug, all right? And creates a lot of psycho effects, which are basically hallucinations or seeing things that aren't real. And when people are under the effects of drugs, especially LSD that are hallucinogens, you can influence a lot of people's behavior. So you got the drug use, you got the orgies taking place, you got the people living in one confined area there. And then thoughts were given to murdering people. And that was the next step that they were going to do. And a little bit about that, George, what you researched on that.
Yes. Some of, like I said earlier, some of the research said that he had started wanting to murder people either to incite the race war, to start, like, to spark it up, to start happening. And so that people would assume that there was Black people killing these white people, whatever. And then also there was another one where it just said that he just wanted to incite chaos. He just wanted people to be scared. And that's also why he would have targeted such a highly known home, referring to the Tate family.
Yes. And, one thing that gets lost, a lot of murder cases and killings are the victims. What's funny about this, and not funny, but what's interesting, everybody remembers Charles Manson, but I guarantee you ask people who Manson killed to remember Sharon Tate. All right.
Which, kind of is sad as well that the only main names that were remembered were the famous ones.
Yeah. And, even the LaBianca families, remember those? There was the heir to the Folger coffee.
Yeah, she was murdered whenever the Tate murders happened. She was over there because Sharon was actually having company over that night. And
a lot of people do remember the victims. So that's one thing. We can't forget the victims on these cases. But this is one of the more unusual ones where they know the victims. Like, you got other serial murders, you just don't know the victims. So we're going to put human side to the victims here in a second about this. So the plan came up. What did your research show? Did your research show that Manson actually participated in any murders?
No. So if anybody out there tries to research this in everything, like just the Manson murders in general, good luck, because everything out there is so conflicting. But yeah, so
technically they're saying that he didn't participate in any murders.
Oh, yeah. So apparently, from what he said, which there are sources that say that, he had murdered people on his own, but whenever it came down to the girls and everything in the Tate LaBianca murders, he never actually killed anybody. He may have tied them up. He may have gone into the LaBianca house with Tex Watson and tied up Leno and Rosemary, but he did not do any of the actual killings. It was all instructed. It was all put onto these very young girls that they had to go and do the killings.
And so we start off with his childhood. You good research on that about his mother, about his upbringing, about his trouble with the law, about being in prison, about his aspiring musical career, playing the guitar and so on, which failed. And then ultimately becoming a person people were gravitated towards, I think because of the drug use and because of his personality. And I think these were wayward kids. In other words, they were kind of lost a little bit. And to have somebody who can, offer them something that they're not getting also was an influence to these young people that were attracted to him in these various ways. And so we have them living on Spawn Ranch, former movie production place. The guy who owned the ranch actually knew they were living there, gave them actually permission to live there. And they're living on the ranch in, quote, harmony, let's say, what they thought was. And then they started planning some murders, all right? And let's start talking about their planning phase and what they did, all right? How do you want to start off with talking about the murders, what happened with the Manson cult?
You could start from a bunch of different spots. I don't know. We could touch upon some of the, the music producer that they had, the stabbing.
There. So that's again a victim involved regarding the murders that happened. When they murdered, it just wasn't purely at random, was it?
No.
So they had
the LaBianca family, you could say that one was a random murder, but that was whenever they were on their murder spree. They were just looking for anybody to kill.
Yep. But the other ones, they had more of a thought process who they're going to kill. And I know this is the biggest name out there, but let's start off with Sharon Tate. Okay. Did you research who Sharon Tate was?
Yeah, I did. She was famous actress at the time. I didn't delve too deep into exactly what she was in or anything like that. But she's a very beautiful woman, famous actor.
Yeah, she was an actress, a very accomplished actress. She was an up-and-comer as far as the acting profession. And she had a lot of Hollywood friends who were friends with hers. She had a personality that really attracted people in a positive way towards her. And she was off to a career of where I think she would have become very stardom in a lot of different ways. And who is she married to? Roman Polanski, right?
Yeah, director.
What do you know about Roman Polanski?
Not too much about him. He wasn't a very big player in the case. He was out of the I think he was out of the country during whenever the murders happened.
Yep. That's the biggest part of it is he wasn't there, but he was married. She was married to Roman Polanski, a famous film director, directed some pretty noteworthy movies, and he's been living overseas because he has been convicted or charged with a series of crimes he's overseas for. He's not come back to the United States, and that's what she was married to. Which again, like you said, George, does not have much of a impact on the case, but that's what she was married to at the time. She also had relationships, friendship relationship with a lot of other people along the way. And was there somebody at her house when she was killed?
Oh yeah, so there was 5 people total, 5 victims total involved that were murdered that night at the Tate home. A few more well-known names were Abigail Forager and then Jay Seabrig. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's correct.
Jay was a pretty well-known hairstylist in like just, in the Hollywood scene kind of. He did a lot of, just well-known people's hair. And then Abigail Folger, of course, she's the heiress to the Folger coffee fortune. And then also there was another Stephen Parent. He was not inside the home. He was leaving the home actually after visiting the caretaker of the house. So he wasn't even there to be with any of, Sharon, any of those people we just talked about. He was there to visit the caretaker of the home.
And the murders that happened with Sharon Tate, I'm not going to necessarily order. I'm going to go about, what we know about the people involved. Was Sharon Tate pregnant at the time?
Yes, Sharon Tate was actually almost full term. She was big baby bump, 9 months pregnant. I mean, ready to pop.
So regarding the murders that happened involving Sharon Tate, let me go off topic about a movie that was recently made within the past couple of years that actually talked about Charles Manson and Sharon Tate. The movie is called Once Upon a Time in America. It's a Quentin Tarantino movie. It is fiction, but based on some basic factual issues with the Charles Manson family followers, however we want to word them. And it's a what if movie. I've watched the movie probably 5 times. And one thing that I'm gravitated towards the movie, it's a what if Sharon Tate would never have been killed by the Manson family. So it shows the Manson family showing up to where Sharon Tate lived on the night of she was going to be killed. And he encounters a couple of other Hollywood people in a house which is down the street. And it shows what happened to Tex and some of the other followers regarding the encounter, and Sharon Tate survived, what her life would have been like. So what I want to talk about here is take a look at the movie. It puts a human side to Sharon Tate. It shows a human side to her acting. Talk a little bit about some of the movies she was in. So it's called Once Upon a Time in America, Quentin Tarantino movie. Again, Quentin Tarantino movies, you have to have kind of a hearty, interesting humor to watch those. But again, I gravitate towards that because the what if Manson and followers would have been killed before they killed her. So anyways, Sharon Tate, what do you know about the house after Sharon Tate was killed? Anything you remember about the scene itself?
So for the scene, I do remember that. So Stephen Parent, he's found in his car. He was the very young kid as well. He was 18 whenever this happened. And so he was found in his car he was leaving the house at the time. And then I do believe that Abigail Folger was found in the front yard, as well as somebody else was found in the front yard, I remember. And then on the inside the house was where the hairstylist Jay was found, as well as Sharon Tate. Yep. And I believe that they were actually tied together, and then she was tied up as well.
What about inside the house? Did you research anything that happened inside the house? What was done with her baby, and also what was done? Anything written inside the house?
So inside of the house, or on the front door of the house, I believe is what they wrote pigs in Sharon's blood, referring to them as pigs. I believe that also used to be a phrase that people would call rich people back then. They would call them pigs. Sharon was found. Well, and also this is a pretty famous story too, that they had carved a big X on her stomach and she was pregnant. So like, that's just so disturbing, and it's disgusting that they would even do that. All of the victims, though, they were either stabbed or shot repeatedly. And again, the scene was extremely brutal. There's blood everywhere. And you can look at pictures and they're not very good either. It's disgusting.
Well, she's actually alive. She was actually being tortured, believe it or not,
Mhm.
when she was, and so they had tied her up and they were torturing her, and she was still alive when they were killing her and her unborn baby at the time. So it was a brutal murder. I can tell you, in my years as a homicide detective, I have seen very brutal cases and brutal murder scenes before. You don't forget them, and there's always a specific thing that is always out there about a specific case, and I can imagine the investigators never forgot that scene either of what that was on. So we have the murders at the Sharon Tate house. We have Sharon Tate, famous, and all these other individuals being murdered, basically for no reason, based on because who they are. Let's jump into the next set of murders that happened. A little bit more detail. What can you tell me about some of the other killings in separate locations and separate days?
So, on one of the days following, 2 days after the Tate murder, Charles and Tex Watson, and then some of the girls went to the La Bianca home that was also located in Beverly Hills, I believe. And I mean, they just picked it at random. And allegedly, what happened was Tex and Charles went inside the home. They subdued and tied up Lino and Rosemary LaBianca, and then came out to the car, looked in the, I guess Charles said to the girls, he was like, I want you to go inside and kill these people. But this was after he had told the LaBiancas that they were only being robbed, which I cannot imagine just the fear going through them whenever you're told you're being robbed and then you see these girls come into your home, and they knew pretty quickly after that they were not just being robbed, that they were going to be murdered.
Let me tell you about the police aspect about survival. I want everybody to know this. When police are trained, we're always trained the will to survive. No matter what, you train yourself to survive. I guarantee you, somebody comes into my house and they're going to say they're going to rob me. I am always thinking they're going to kill me. And if somebody's going to try to kill me, they're going to earn it. I'm going to fight till the death. All right?
Mhm.
And I think perhaps, may or may not have, they may have thought they're really going to be robbed and they didn't resist back. So, who knows what could have happened. But I felt bad for them thinking they're only going to be robbed. They end up being murdered. And it was a brutal way also, right? The way they were killed.
I mean, yes, it was horrible. A few notes from the scene was that they were taken into separate rooms. And as Rosemary was stabbed for around 41 times, and as she was being stabbed, I can't remember exactly who the girl was, which one of the members that was stabbing her, but the knife bent because it hit bone, and she ended up calling out for Tex and saying, I need help. And Tex came, gave her another knife, and she continued with what she was doing. And it was horribly brutal. The father had war carved into his stomach, which one source said that it was the reason why war was carved into his stomach was because their son was off at war. And as the Manson family member was killing him, I guess she had found out about the son being at war and was somewhat mocking it, being like, oh, you're never going to get to see your son come home. Like, yeah.
And then this was also Death to Pigs was written on the wall inside, as well as this is, I think, the first time the word helter skelter was written.
Yeah, this was the first time that any mention of helter skelter had come up.
And this is written in blood inside the house, I think on the refrigerator it was written. And Helter Skelter was very interesting because Helter Skelter is a Beatles song. And to have all that, and whenever anybody hears the word Helter Skelter, all they think about is Charles Manson. All right. And we're talking about a book. Joe's going to talk about a book here as we progress here a little bit more. So
here's the book. Go buy it.
So we'll talk about that a little bit. Again, we don't make any money off the book.
We don't. Yeah, no, we are not affiliated with.
But we'll talk about the book a little bit. So again, Helter Skelter. Whenever I hear the word Helter Skelter, I think of Manson and the deaths of the LaBianca family. So again, there are individuals that were killed. Any other murders that the cult was involved in?
Yeah, there were. I mean, it was speculated that the cult could have been involved in 30 plus killings. It's just really hard to track down because there's so many people involved. I mean, and you don't really know who all were members of it because there's no media, there's no social media at the time, there's no anything like that. But as far as I know, I mean, it could have just been everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of murders that they're suspected of committing. Again, the time in there, they had to look for the physical evidence to be able to prosecute them in court. And that turned out to be an issue there, too, about prosecution. So we know that they were eventually prosecuted. Charles Manson was and his followers, family, cult members, however you want to word them.
And not all of his members. There was only about 5 of them that ended up going to court and getting charged.
Exactly. So let's talk about Cordelia. Let's talk about the book a little bit. Who wrote that book, Georgia? Hold it up again so people can see it.
Vincent, and pardon my pronunciation of his last name, Bugliosi.
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 Bugliosi, yep.
Yep.
So he wrote the book Helter Skelter years and years ago, and he was the chief prosecutor in the Manson case. And actually, it's a very good book. It talks about a lot of details in the trial that the public may or may not be aware of. Very interesting. Again, we don't make anything off the book. I just want people to be more interested and get more knowledge about this case here. What do you know about the trial? Anything you did research about the trial itself?
So what I learned about the trial was that, so first of all, to go into who he is, Vincent, he's he's an amazing lawyer. He worked up the ranks really fast. He only lost one case, which was in, I believe it was a civil court. It was just not a very well-known case at all. And then he ended up moving up, getting to work high-profile cases involving murder, and after that, he never lost a case. He was an incredible prosecutor. He was very, very, very devoted to his work. It was quoted that he said that he would work 100-hour weeks just to be able to solve this Manson case. And also it was quoted that he told Charles himself that he said, I am going to charge, or he goes, I am going to convict you for murder, but he said, I'm going to make sure that you get a fair trial. And so he knew he was guilty, but he still was like, listen, we could take the shortcut, but I'm going to get you a fair trial. I don't know exactly how long the trials lasted for, but
there's some interesting things that happened during the trial. All right. How about his followers? What were the followers doing at the time? And anything, tell us about his followers' family. I don't know what to call them. All right. But anyways.
Yeah, the cult, they were acting a fool outside the courthouse. They had carved X's on their foreheads in solidarity with Manson. They had shaved their heads. They were outside of the courthouse whenever this was happening. They were yelling and
they're being disruptive in the entire court atmosphere and stuff. And again, they carved X's, actually carved it with knives or razor blades in their head. It was a big X in their foreheads, shaved their heads. And that's how gravitated they were towards this guy to make the disruption there during his trial. So it's interesting, like you said, even though he didn't participate, even though I still question that in the murders, he still went to trial on this, right? Were anybody else convicted of murder in these cases?
Yes. Actually, all of the people that went to court ended up getting murder charges. I don't believe anybody got the death penalty, but yeah, they all were charged and had some life sentences.
Yeah. How about there are more women than guys, right? Tex was one of them, correct?
Oh, yeah. Tex was probably the only notable man that was involved in the group. And he was also an authority figure. He was Charles Manson's, I guess you could say, right-hand man. He was the only other person in the group that would have authority over the girls.
Yeah. And it's interesting that there were mostly women that were girls gravitated towards him. But Tex Watson participated in the murders. He was very much involved in that too. As a side note, there was a movie that was produced in 1976 called Helter Skelter. It's actually a pretty good movie. Watch that. It's not a true documentary, of course. A lot of embellishment, but it's actually pretty good. Shows about the history and I guess what went on, some of the aspects of the trial, as well as the murder cases. Perception of this case here. Manson was convicted, correct?
Yes.
And when Manson was convicted, he served time in San Quentin. Now, the death penalty had been available in California, but they had changed it. They had said the death penalty was unconstitutional. So it turned out that none of them were ever executed. And Manson was in prison. Manson did a couple of interviews that were very interesting. One interview I remember in particular was with Geraldo Rivera. I was actually bodyguard for Geraldo Rivera one time when he was in St. Louis doing some stuff. So anyways, I actually met him up close a few times. Anyways, so the interview, it showed the neurotic and psychotic behavior of Manson during the interview that Geraldo Rivera did with him. One thing I noticed on his forehead, instead of having an X, he turned the X into what? Remember?
Swastika.
Swastika, exactly right. So he made a swastika in his forehead out of the X that was marked in his forehead. And I just want to say the interviews that I've seen him do were interesting. All right. The psychotic behavior, his thought process, what he was saying.
I mean, they're hilarious. I don't understand how anyone could want to listen to this guy. He's insane.
Drugs. Remember we talked about the hallucination?
Which also, I wanted to mention this earlier. Whenever I first was learning about this case, I thought they were doing some hardcore drugs, guys. It was just marijuana and LSD.
LSD is a hardcore drug.
Okay, but also, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen anybody on acid before, but they don't really seem homicidal to me. Usually they're just looking at grass.
They're influential.
Yeah,
right?
but it
Think about
does.
that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And if you have a person standing in front of you and you're off 7 hits of acid and they're saying that they're God, you're probably going to believe them.
Yeah. And how about this? Marijuana is classified as a depressant, right?
I mean, if you can't drive on marijuana, that means that
it's a depressant, hallucinogen, and it's also a stimulant. It's all 3 in 1 marijuana. So don't discount marijuana. We'll talk about that in a future episode about my thoughts about marijuana. All right. So
Boy.
right now. So anyways, yeah, we have Manson convicted in San Quentin. His family was also convicted. Actually, one just got out of jail recently. So, and
are you sure she got out of jail? I was reading up on this, and she had actually been sent to get parole twice. They had court approved parole, and then the governor said no.
I think she's out of jail.
You think she got approved?
Yep.
Well,
one of his followers named Squeaky Frum. Anybody know what Squeaky Frum did? She tried to assassinate President Ford, actually. So anyways, a lot of interesting things went on behind the scenes with his followers. And they were convicted. Manson, you know what happened to Manson eventually?
Oh, he got colon cancer and he passed away.
How do you feel about that?
Happy.
Okay.
I think that he should have suffered the death penalty. I think that he thought he was above everything and he needed to be brought back down to earth. But you know what? God took care of that one. So whatever.
Okay, what about what happened to his remains? What happened to his personal effects? You know what happened there?
That's a great question. What happened, Gary?
I think a relative wanted all of his remains and stuff, okay? So I think
I'm sure they're all crazy.
Why did somebody want to get a hold of any of his remains or any of his property? Exactly.
Money.
So that was a big part of it, okay? It's very interesting about what happened to him eventually. Mm-hmm. What I would do is, if you want to really look up what happened to Charles Manson's remains, what happened to his property, and see who actually got that. Very interesting. So anyways, yeah, we've been talking about Charles Manson, about the cult following. And out of anything on this case here, we're going to find out with these different cults. This is a minor cult. I'm not making minor about the killings he did. Minor cult compared to the followings that the next individual we had regarding Jonestown and the Waco incident, regarding how many people were followers of these two individuals that ended up losing their lives. And the sad fact is, Manson followers didn't lose their lives over this.
No, and also it wasn't all of them.
Yeah,
it was, again, just a small group of people that were doing the murders. But in Jonestown, I mean, everyone, even the children, even people that weren't involved in doing the murders, they all suffered.
Exactly. We'll talk about that in a subsequent episode along with Waco. How many people died horrible deaths in Waco. So we're going to have retired special agent Tony P. Warchek on the Waco episode. Tony retired from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Farms, and Explosives. He was actually at Waco, and he can provide some insight about that a little bit more in depth. And I remember Jonestown specifically. I remember that happening. We'll talk about those episodes coming up. So anything else you want to add, Georgia?
No, just be smart. Do not listen to people as closely as they listen to this guy. And if something's suspicious, if something smells fishy, it's probably fish.
Exactly. So. We are talking about Luigi Mangione, and one of people in my class last week said, "Wasn't that Luigi Manicotti?" I said, "Manicotti is an Italian food. Okay, Mangione is also a trumpetist. Okay, Charles.
You know what? And Luigi is like Mario. Now I'm hungry. You're talking about noodles and Italian food.
We'll talk about all that as we progress further. All right. I'll buy you guys all smoothly later on. So anyway, we have Allie and Sarah working aboard today. We have Georgia. And again, Georgia, welcome her to Trend Media. Again, she's working behind the scenes. She is going to be in future episodes. I can say that Georgia adds some good color comments behind the scenes. So that thing we're going to be interested to hear in the future. So we got future episodes you're going to be on, right, Georgia?
Yeah. Hopefully I'll be less stuttery and I'll get it together a little.
So thanks to our producers, Allie and Sarah, and our new employee here, Georgia Means. And stay well informed. Again, we try to provide the facts of cases to pique everybody's interest. And we hope you join us on the next episode. Again, we have a 3-part series on cults, starting with Charles Manson. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this episode of The Trend. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us at The Trend's website at www.trendmediallc.com, or you can email us at any time at thetrend@trendmediallc.com. We welcome everybody's comments, suggestions, or reviews. Don't forget to stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Trend Media Podcast, and join the conversation on Facebook by searching The Trend Podcast. Check out our Amazon page through the link on our website, where you'll find some of our recommended products. We'll be back next time with more true crime stories, insights on law enforcement trends, and current trends with our region and the people we serve. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay part of The Trend.